Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Today I'm doing a hands-on review of an N-scale 1950s vintage Chevrolet flatbed truck from Showcase Miniatures. This hands-on review has a different format than some of my other reviews. Since this is a kit and the results depend on the skill of the modeler, I'm not going to give it a score. I'll just give you my impressions as I build it. This is kit number 94 from Showcase Miniatures. It's an N-scale model of a 1950s Chevy half-ton flatbed truck. It's available for $14.95 direct from Showcase Miniatures. In case any non-model railroaders are watching, N-scale is 1/160th scale. This is a nice kit that will fit into the 1950s era many model railroaders prefer, though it could also be used for later time periods or as a standalone model. Showcase Miniatures also offers a pickup version of this kit, number 30, as well as several other trucks with the same basic body style. To make sure I don't break any delicate parts, I start opening kits like this by using some pliers to pry the staple on the back. Then I pull the cardboard wrapper apart. The kit includes instructions for building the flatbed, a bag with parts for the flatbed, and another bag with parts for the truck itself. The bag with the flatbed parts has several laser-cut wood pieces and a water slide decal sheet. Opening the other parts bag reveals a resin cabin hood and a soft metal chassis. The last part that looks kind of like another cab is a mandrel with vacuum-formed clear plastic over it that can be used to make a windshield. The packaging is not reusable, but I expect most modelers will want to store the completed model either on a layout or in some kind of container that will keep it from getting damaged. Chevrolet produced trucks with the same basic body style and grille combo between 1947 and 1953. The 1954 trucks were similar but had a different grille. My grandparents had one of these in their garage when I was young, painted a beige color. I built this N-scale pickup from another Showcase Miniatures kit that's similar to the flatbed in this review. I don't know if the flatbed part of this truck follows a particular prototype, but it certainly looks plausible. The white metal parts in my kit are mostly free of flash. I'll use a small flat file to get rid of some flash around the tires on the chassis. On the body, I'll use my hobby knife with a new sharp blade to get rid of the flash inside the cab windows and in the fenders. I'll use some 400 grit sandpaper to smooth out some of the rough spots on the outside of the fenders. With both parts cleaned up, I'll test fit the cab to the chassis. This looks pretty good. Now that the flash is gone, I'll soak the chassis in some isopropyl alcohol to remove any oils or dirt. After a few minutes, I'll set it on a paper towel to dry. The resin cab needs to be washed. I'll use some dish soap and rinse it in some warm water. Once it's clean, I'll set it on a paper towel to dry overnight. Now that the parts are dry, they're ready for painting. I'll use some masking tape and a piece of scrap wood to make a holder for the cab. I'll use some sprung tweezers to hold the chassis. Normally I don't like to use rattle can paint, but I've grown to like Tamiya fine surface primer. The quality of the finish is similar to an airbrush. A primer coat is always a good idea and essential for certain colors like yellow, orange, or red. I'll give all the parts several light coats of primer. The finish will be more even if you build up the paint slowly in thin layers rather than trying to cover everything in one coat. For the body color, I'm using Vallejo Air Light Sea Blue. This water-based acrylic paint comes pre-thin for airbrushing, so you just squeeze some into the airbrush bottle and go. On the chassis, I'm using some water-based Testors Model Master Flat Black acrylic. I add a few drops of Windex to thin it. As with the primer, several light coats work best. Since this model has decals, I'm spraying some microscale microgloss on the body. I thin this with Windex as well. Decals adhere better to a glossy surface. Kits like this don't have a lot of parts, so how good they look really depends on the paint job. Since this is a utility truck, I figured the rims would be black. I'll use a dab of silver paint to simulate the small hubcap. The silver also works for the bumpers. I'll use silver on the truck's grille as well. I'll put a dot of white paint on each headlight. After cutting the decals to size, I'll put them on a piece of scrap plastic. A drop of water will help to release them from the backing sheet. I'll work on one side at a time. While I'm waiting for the decal, I'll brush some microset onto the door. Microset should always go on first, under the decal. Once the decal is loosened, I'll use a small screwdriver to gently nudge it onto the model. I'll adjust the position of the decal until I'm happy with it. If it gets sticky, I'll apply some more microset. When the decal is dry on the model, then I'll apply some microsol on top of the decal to soften it. This will make it conform to the paint and look like it's painted on. Sometimes it takes more than one application of microsol. Don't try to move the decal after applying microsol. Holding the model up to the light is a good way to check the decal for bubbles or silvering. If there were any bubbles, they could be poked with the tip of a hobby knife before applying more microsol. This one looks good. At this point, the cab can be glued to the chassis. I'm applying a little CA glue with a piece of scrap wire. Then I can just press the parts together. Now I can turn my attention to the stake bed. The solid wood piece is supposed to fit between the rails and the back of the chassis. Mine is a little too tight, so I'll use a flat file to trim down the sides a bit. Now it fits. I'm using a number 17 chisel blade in my hobby knife and a plate glass cutting surface to remove the laser cut wood parts from the frets. The bottom piece has an outline on it. The wood piece that I filed fits in that area. This is a peel and stick part. Once it's positioned, I can just press down firmly to secure it. I'll glue the top of the flatbed to the bottom with some thick CA. This piece has peel and stick stakes that go with the horizontal slats. Cutting them out is a little tricky because of the backing paper. I've cut one out and now I'll remove the paper. It's hard to see the sticky side, so I'm being careful to keep the stake in the same orientation as I place it on the slats. When the stakes are attached, it gives the sides a little more dimension. The kit has two options for the stake sides, a low-profile board and the full-height slats. I opted to go with the low-profile board the way the truck looks in the illustration on the package. Putting the tiny peel and stick stakes on the sides of the low-profile boards is extremely difficult due to the small sides. I managed to do it, but it took me a couple hours. This is definitely something that requires patience. I'm using thick CA to glue the front stakes and slats to the flatbed. The flatbed wood looks too new to me, so before I go any further I want to age it. This is an alcohol-based wood stain from Hunterline that I picked up at a train show some years ago. I'll apply some to the flatbed with a microbrush. After it's had a chance to dry for a few minutes, I think the wood looks much better. Now I can attach the low-profile sides. Using CA is proving difficult, so for the third side I'm going to try canopy glue. The part is easier to attach with this glue and it's staying upright, whereas the CA had a tendency to fall over. Canopy glue is probably a better option for the wood parts. One nice thing about having some options in the kit is that I have enough stake and slat material left over for another truck. I'm using the canopy glue to attach the completed truck bed to the chassis. Now that the truck is mostly complete, I'm giving it a coat of Tamiya clear flat to seal the decals and hide any leftover shininess from the glue on the wood parts. Next, I'll use a sharp number 11 blade in my hobby knife to cut the windshield out of the material vacuum formed over the cab mandrel. Where to cut involves a bit of guesswork, as there aren't any grooves or lines that I can see. On the bottom, I can use the angle where the windshield meets the hood. The cutout piece of windshield is very small and hard to see. I'll use some canopy glue to attach it to the truck. The glue will dry clear so the white areas will go away. The truck is now essentially complete. I'm using a little black weathering powder on a microbrush to darken the grille. I'll use a little tan powder to add some road dust to the lower parts of the fenders and running boards. While I'm at it, I'll do the tires too. The same tan color works well in the flatbed. I'll go over the center area with some black weathering powder since that's the part that would typically take the biggest beating in day-to-day use. I want this truck to look well used but not old or decrepit, so I'll stay away from rust. The kit includes material that I think is for a simulated wood plank load. I'm going to hold off on that for now until I figure out how I want to use the truck in a layout setting. I think this truck turned out really nice. It looks good with my other Showcase Miniatures truck. While the pickup version was relatively easy to build, with only 3 parts plus the windshield, the stake bed is a lot more complicated and can try the patience of even someone like me who's used to working with tiny parts. I think the results are worth it, but I wouldn't consider this a beginner kit. Experienced modelers should be able to handle it. If I had a nit to pick, it's that the instructions could be a little better. For example, the extra boards for what I assume could be a load aren't explained. The instructions also don't cover the low-profile sideboards that I used. If you want to find out how to deal with the windshield, you have to go to the Showcase Miniatures website. This is a well-thought-out kit that builds into a very cool model. I'm giving it a yellow signal only because of the difficulty in building the stake bed. Overall, I think this is a pretty nice kit. If you're looking for some 1950s vintage N-scale vehicles for your layout, then be sure to check it out.